dear listeners. I'm pleased to present part 2 of our conversation with Nat from Collective Action Comics on Michael Chabon's third novel, The Amazing Adventures of Cavalier and Clay. This is the second part of the conversation, as I've already mentioned, and we fill in sort of the important parts that we didn't get to in part 1. We mentioned the sort of strange Antarctica section of this book, as well as discussing our general takes about what the book gets right about entertainment and what we think the book could maybe have worked a little bit more on in terms of identity. As always, thanks to Nat for joining us for this episode, and we hope you enjoy part 2 of this conversation.
I feel like there's one more thing that's very important to get to, which we have referenced, and that is that Sammy meets Tracy Bacon. Is that his name?
Yes, Tracy Bacon.
Yes, Tracy Bacon, who is the guy who's been hired to play the escapist in the radio serial drama. Who basically like looks just like the character does. He's like this hunky blonde beefcake. And Sammy realizes pretty quickly that he's gay. And I both really liked this part of the book, and then as it went on, I started to really not like this part of the book.
Talk about unceremonious deaths.
Yes.
Anyway. But I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. No.
Well, I just not talking about the deaths because I don't want to get too far ahead. But so obviously Tracy Bacon is a parallel for Bud Collyer, the guy that played Superman in the radio show. And they were going to hire two different people, one to play Clark Kent, one to play Superman. And then Bud was like, I can just do this to my voice. And they're like, whoa. Another funny story is that after the first season, they fired the woman who was playing Lois Lane because she asked for too much money. And then when they were doing a casting call for Lois Lane, she put on a blonde wig, came in, and then got the part again.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Holy crap.
Joan Alexander. Anyway, the whole Tracy Bacon stuff, like they talk about, I'm pretty sure we don't know his actual backstory.
No, right? He's very cagey about his past. Like I feel like the implication is that he just has a very boring, normal past and he lies about it to seem interesting.
There's also a reference where it's like he had many tussles with the cops during that scene where the cops break into their house. And like, so that to me, that implied that like maybe he had been kind of like, running from the cops for a while as well. And so maybe that's also why he was cagey about his backstory. But yeah.
Well, like he also mentions at one point, he says that like his family, or he's got like a law degree or something, or his family's in advertising or something like that, something more prosaic than being an actor, a superhero actor on the radio, right?
I think so. Yeah.
I can't remember exactly what he says, but yes, there's certainly an implication that
that's Bud Collyer.
Yeah.
That's Bud Collyer didn't want people to know that he was playing Superman. He like wanted to be a lawyer.
Wow.
But like was just had a good voice for radio and was just like, yeah, it's a paycheck.
Well, again, it's interesting because like it's not really mentioned a lot because we kind of enter the book at the point where like the New Deal's happened already. Like the economy's kind of like getting better again. But like all these characters like lived through the Great Depression. Like I guess I guess it was still the Great Depression in Prague. It probably just looked very different than it looked here.
I mean, basically the only country that wasn't suffering from the Great Depression was the USSR.
Hey.
And a lot of that is because they had one previously, and then they had a revolution, and then that fixed it.
Interesting. Funny how that works.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
But I feel like there's kind of an implication where it's like he kind of fell into this because there was nothing else to do. But I also feel like there's kind of a thing where he's a little bit of a blank slate.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what Sammy almost falls for, is kind of the fact that he can project onto him in this way.
Interesting. Like he projects onto the escapist.
Yeah. No, absolutely. It's kind of this thing where the escapist is like basically his ideal man, but that can't actually exist. Or if it does exist, it's his cousin.
Yeah.
And obviously that doesn't work. So
well,
he
and like in that part where he sees him in the fire escape, like then Chabon makes a point to say like it's not like that. Like he wanted to be, not possess his cousin or something. Like it's what the sentence says. So Chabon was kind of like heading that off at the pass, so that like he can sort of.
I imagine somebody read that, like he gave him the manuscript, and they were like, I have some questions. And he's like, oh shit, okay, hold on.
Yeah.
No, you don't understand. They're both me.
Yeah.
It's not incest because they're both me.
Yeah. And I love myself.
Yeah. Well, and also Tracy Bacon being named Tracy Bacon is just kind of like, it's like, not supposed to be doing this. And that's like kind of like, yeah, not kosher. Like,
oh shit. I didn't think about that.
Well, because I saw that, I was like, that's also like a little, like, we've been talking about how his naming is a little on the nose, and it's like, yeah, it's like not kosher. He brings him home for, I can't remember what, so his mom can meet him.
Yeah, shout out to his ultra progressive 1930s mom.
Yeah, see, that's a scene that I liked, and then I was like, yeah, wait, it is the 30s, because like, they're talking about like if he's a good friend or something. Oh no, they're talking about if he's going to be a good escapist. And Sammy says like, yeah, I think he is going to be. And then it's like his mom looks him in the eye for the first time that evening and says, is he? So it's like, yeah, his mom is hip to it and is cool. But still like that interaction with his mother felt very like real to me in the book, I guess. It's very like, it's kind of down to earth and in a story that can get so all over the place at times.
Yeah, there's no red painted cardboard tubes.
Yeah, or just like quirky things happening. It's just kind of like a family dinner, basically. Yeah, so
Eleanor Roosevelt doesn't show up unannounced. But yeah, I think then basically they are having this incredible success with the comic book. It gets turned into a radio show, and then national publication comes calling. Which we don't hear about until Sammy and Joe try to negotiate for better pay.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then they're told that they can get that better pay and then get some of that royalty money from the radio show and some from Luna Moth, which is a new character that they've created and are going to sell to Jack Ashkenazi and Sheldon Anapol. And they're basically shot down because they won't give up their principles and stop having him, the escapist, fight Nazis.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then they're told by George Deasy, the #1 character in the book, that National has sued Empire Comics, the company they work for, because the escapist looks and acts too much like Superman.
Yeah.
And we come back to that line that we mentioned earlier in the episode where Sheldon Anapol said, "Can you just make me a Superman?" And so as a bargaining tool, Sammy perjures himself in the subpoena or in the court hearings and says, "No, I was never asked to make a Superman."
Yeah.
Yes.
And then we cut to the next part of the book, which is their enormous wealth.
Yes.
And the 6 record changer that he buys, that fucking monstrosity.
Yes.
Canamuse.
Yes.
Yeah, that his mother can never know about.
Never know about.
I also like that he eats like bagels and lox every day for a month or something, or like,
and then he buys all these suits that sound hideous, like these giant pinstripe suits where I'm sure he looked like a Dick Tracy character walking around. There is like some nice color in this book with just kind of, the descriptions of kind of mid-century stuff. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm always kind of a sucker for that.
Well, you mentioned, I think, was it you that included the quote about the typewriter?
Yeah. Well, because I think in this book he also has a genius for describing like fictional objects, and there's a bit where it talks about like Sammy Clayman had reduced 2 typewriters to slag, like, and then there's like a long description about just how good he is. Hold on, it's worth reading, and like coming up with like plots. So just real quick,
he dreams in 9 panels and weird advertisements.
Yeah, because he goes, he had typed stories for comic books for the past 7 years: costume hero, romance, horror, adventure, true crime, science fiction and fantasy, westerns, sea yarns, Bible stories, a couple of issues of Classics Illustrated, Sax Rohmer imitations, Walter Gibson imitations, H. Rider Haggard imitations, Rex Stout imitations, and then so thoroughly tuned to the generation of highly conventional, severely formalistic 8 to 12 page miniature epics that he could, without great effort, write, talk, smoke, listen to a ball game, and keep an eye on the clock all at the same time. Yeah, he's just that good at writing stories, which is like, again, just another prefer paragraph, but one that I like quite a bit. So,
who is the guy that wrote the Shadow novels?
Anybody
remember his name?
I have Wikipedia pulled up.
Yeah. But
I always have pulled up just in case. Walter B. Gibson.
Yeah, I think it was Walter B. Gibson, who, or somebody in his immediate orbit or periphery, one of those pulp writers, who made so much money off of his books that he bought a 40-room mansion or something like that. But because he was a machine, he put a typewriter in every single room.
Oh my God.
So that he could just shit out ideas when they came to him. And I'm pretty sure that's I choose to believe that's not apocryphal. I choose to believe there is magic in this world.
Yeah.
So, and that's magic to me. That's incredible.
Absolutely.
What I wouldn't give for a fleet of Remingtons.
Yeah, in various rooms of your house, you could just waltz through and keep the idea running. So
yeah, right. It's a proto Google Docs.
I do like just kind of the way that he portrays like creativity as like a compulsive force in this book, where like these guys are, again, they're making money off doing it, which obviously makes it a lot more sustainable. But yeah, just I can't imagine like being compelled to create at this scale.
Volume, mass, and variety.
But it's also clearly like it speaks to like some very deep issues they both have, which I think is also like they're not doing this because it's fun for them at a certain point. There's a great bit again, kind of in the same part that Ben's talking about, where they're talking about how Sammy like inserts a sidekick into every book he works on, because he's clearly like very tortured about his father getting crushed under a boulder.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that I'm glad that later it is Chabon is very clear that Sammy is doing that because it makes the sales of the books skyrocket, because there's a lot of other characters implying that he is inserting these young boys into his works because he himself is gay. And I, it's a fine line to walk there when you're implying that gay people are pedophiles. Yeah. Like there's so much like historical propaganda with that messaging that I'm very glad that at least it was explicitly not that.
Yeah.
Because like some guy, there's like a bogus scientist or expert who's saying,
Frederick Wortham. He's a real guy.
That's a real guy. Yeah.
Well, the corrupting influence versus it's just like, oh, he's just a good dad. Like, it's like just a good father figure, not that. Yeah. So
When I read that, I pounded my fist on the table and I was like, no, Batman is not his dad. He's his brother. That's what Walt Llewellyn says. And that's what I believe.
The Black Casebook's party line.
They're non-negotiables. Oh, it's so funny. Well, no, because we got to talk about all of the weird bullshit that was happening when Tommy dies, right? So the thing is that Joe has been working his ass off to try to purchase passage on a ship through some sort of like NGO or nonprofit or something like that. I guess it's just a private venture that he was introduced to by Rosa Luxemburg Sachs. And he's trying to purchase the passage for all these child refugees. And he's doing so with proceeds from the comic book, and he's now got a magic act, the Great Cavalier.
Right, which is 4 bar mitzvahs.
Yeah, the bar mitzvah circuit.
Yeah. Basically, like he finally like gets fully integrated into like kind of the New York Jewish community, and like all these people like find out like, oh, you're a magician. My nephew is turning 13 next week, and he'd love to have a magician there.
Yeah, and so multiple things happen. We get our second Abeling encounter, which is the part that I think we were talking about. I think before we started recording, I can't remember the part that is. It feels like it's a description of what's happening in the pulps or in the comics.
Yeah,
in the comics.
It turns out to be real, and it's Abeling thinks of himself as the saboteur, the escapist greatest enemy in the fiction. And he's putting together a dastardly plan to destroy the escapist. And in the midst of it, has to get his suit from the laundry and take a bus uptown.
Yeah.
And that's when you find out that it's actually Abeling who's there to sabotage a show that the Great Cavalier is putting on, because he's put a bomb in a trident that he's going to hurl at his nemesis.
and the trident construction causes it to not work. So
not to work right.
Oh yeah.
As intended. It goes off, but
it basically in Abling's like hands, right? And like making everybody has to go to hospital, basically. Getting Abeling arrested and sent up to the Hooskow. And then after that, there is, I think, one more show that he puts on for a kid who begs him to do an actual escape.
Yeah.
Yes.
And he's like, sure, whatever, kid. Even though he's constantly been refusing to do it. Something about this kid's demeanor. Again, a kid, I guess this is kid number 2 of maybe 3, that is wise beyond their years.
Yeah.
But he begs him to do an escape. Guy does it. But before he's finished setting up the escape, he finds out that the boat that he has helped charter is is sunk by a German U-boat.
Yeah.
And is lost and just gone. And his brother was on it. And that drives him to try to kill himself by not actually escaping the fountain he has decided to hurl himself into for the trick.
Yeah, in a kind of like Freudian compulsion to return to like a former trauma, in that he would have died if he had not been saved by Kornblum. He sort of tries to do it again now that he's learned that Tommy's actually dead.
Well, and also crucially, this whole section is told from Rose's perspective, and she's just gotten pregnant. Found out she's pregnant by Joseph like the same day.
Yeah,
that's right. So what a turmoil she must have been in. And this is paralleled with the pinpoint, the single head of the nail or point of the nail in Tommy's experience with like his sexuality.
Yes.
At this point in his life. Who wants to take that one?
So this is when he's like out on the roof, right?
No, this is at the beach.
Oh, this is at the beach.
House.
Yes.
This is the beach house.
So there were some other encounters before, like when they were at the World's Fair.
That's true. That's true. When they were up in the like Great Machine or whatever.
Yeah, but so Sammy has departed for a weekend away with Tracy and some other confirmed bachelors to this beach house, like 3 hours outside of the city.
Yeah.
And isn't the maid literally Ebling's sister?
Yes. That's why I said we have 2.5 encounters.
Yes.
with Carl Abeling.
Yeah, and she sees one of the comic books of the escapist there as well. Yeah.
Yes. And she's basically decided that comic books are the reason that her brother did this was the comic book's fault.
Yes.
So she sees the comic book and she's like has kind of like this beach house is like owned by like a guy who is known to be like he's a known homosexual.
Yeah, the most beautiful man in New York.
God, I can't even imagine. But she's like kept her mouth shut because obviously he's like paying her bills. But she, like, this is like the straw that breaks the camel's back. She calls the cops, and like the house gets raided for having a big gay party inside. And Sammy, like, they all get like roughed up.
Sammy especially.
Sammy is propositioned by a FBI agent who's like on site, more or less, probably kind of to do this. It's implied.
Probably so, yeah.
Yeah.
Did you guys ever watch Cruising? It reminded me of the opening of Cruising.
No.
There's a bit in the opening of Cruising where these two cops who are cruising the beat where all of the queer people hang out, and they're like saying horrible stuff, and then they just immediately do the thing to what happens to Sammy, where they're like, hey, you gotta help us out, otherwise we're gonna do something. Like, and so like the fact that Friedkin at least opens with that is like, yeah, all cops are horrible, and I'm getting right to this weird like like pathology that's underneath this. It reminded me a lot of that scene, actually. But yeah,
but basically Sammy allows himself to be assaulted to secure release for himself and Bacon.
Yeah, no, not Bacon.
Oh, not Bacon. Yes.
No, it's the guy that gave him that. It was like Dean or Dave. Somebody.
The guy who pulled him under the table.
Yes.
Yeah. And
because Tracy's already been carted off by this point. So
by like a dozen men, because he's a human mountain.
Yes.
And that's when they like imply that he had tussles with cops before.
Yes.
And then they kind of leave it at that. So,
but it's also implied that the cop would continue to assault like over and over Sammy, except that Sammy's mom calls that house.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because she has been given word from Rosa of Tommy's death.
And Joe's disappearance.
Yeah, Joe's disappearance too.
Yes. And Joe's disappearance. Oh shit, hold on.
Because crucially, after someone saves him from drowning, and then he just like runs off.
Yeah.
Yes. And then because somebody knows that Sammy is there, the cops basically can't just make him disappear too.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
So he's sort of he's like saved from this predicament. Yeah.
And then an already ridiculous book goes off the fucking rails.
Yes.
It basically just becomes like the thing, without like it being the actual thing, but like the Antarctic horror, the fact that he's trapped there, the fact that people die and they have to deal with it, like it,
So Joe, in perhaps a understandable fit of pique, after finding out his brother has been murdered by a German U-boat, lucky him, the United States has entered the war at this point, so he enlists in the Navy.
Right. And he gets sent to like an Antarctic research station, I think.
Yes, to do radio work.
What is the surveillance?
Yes. Yeah. And then, the book gets really weird for like 60 pages.
Also, we should say that Rosa basically tells Sammy after Joe left that she's pregnant, and they decide to have a marriage of convenience. Yeah. Because Sammy's running with the cops. He has decided to...
Which we don't find out until after this long-ass scene.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, the whole Antarctica thing, but it's like Sammy doesn't want to be gay because of what happened. He just wants to do this marriage of convenience so they can take care of the kid. So
yes. It's a bit of a twist, because it seems at the scene where Rosa tells Sammy that it seems like she's going to get an abortion. Like she basically says like, I want to get an abortion. And Sammy's like,
I want you to go with me.
Yes, I will help you with this. And then we smash cut to Antarctica. We find out that Joe has made friends with a very sweet old dog named Oyster.
Oyster, also known as Muscles.
Yeah. But then there's a carbon monoxide leak
and everyone dies.
Yeah, and like this is where I was like, this is reminding me of the Thing. And then at one point Chabon's like, some cruel evil force from the wastes have made its presence known. And I was like, wow, you just like really wanted to write the Thing or some kind of like Mountains of Madness-esque scene where you encounter some evil in the Antarctic wastes. But many people of them die from the monoxide poisoning.
Yes, and Joe is left alone with kind of this already questionably sane airman.
Yeah.
Who is patching his plane with seals. That was like one of the bits in this, like, that made me want to kind of
science.
I don't understand that. Well, no, he explains it. A plane is just a seal that swims through the air.
Oh, right. Of course. How silly of me.
Yeah, is it supposed to be like that he's insane because they're like alone? Like they've both gone insane in their own ways, being alone, and all of their crewmates and other dogs have died except Oyster.
Yeah. This part just didn't work for me. It sounds like to me like it didn't really work for you guys either.
Yeah, sentences, the chapters get choppy. It almost feels like it was gonna take control of the book. Like he was like, I'm gonna write this whole other thing, and then he had to like really like tamp it down to get to the end of the story.
Yeah. At this point, I was definitely like, after this point in the book, there were whole stretches of it where I was just shouting at it, I don't care. I don't care. I don't care. Why are you telling me this?
Well, I think it is superfluous. Like, aside from Joe finding out basically by opening a letter that had been sent to him like months, if not years before from Rosa, like finding out that he has a son.
Yeah.
And also trying to actually kill a German man.
But even that's still kind of superfluous.
Yeah, and like that goes wrong and it doesn't turn out. Yeah, it's like, I guess it's like it's like he has to go to the ends of the earth to do this thing that it turns out that he doesn't actually want to do when sort of the opportunity it presents itself.
Accidentally ends up succeeding doing and regretting it more than anything else in his entire fucking life.
It feels like Chabon is kind of like feels compelled to be like, war is hell, but also like I'm kind of scared to write like a real like war story, so I'm going to have most of the people die by carbon monoxide poisoning. And then obviously like killing another human being, I've never done it, I can't say for sure, but I assume a traumatic experience no matter what. But it's also kind of like, really, this is the thing that he regrets it more than anything. He regrets killing a literal Nazi.
Yeah, and they don't really talk about it afterwards. Like I feel like there's no like, Joe, remember killing that man. You know, like it's just like he just goes back to the U.S.
Joe looked at his son and remembered killing a man.
Like I don't know. There's no like maybe it's worked into the construction of the Golem, his thing that he's been working on for 9 years that you talked about earlier, Nat. But like the book never returns to the scene of Antarctica. Really, it just kind of is like a detour.
Yeah, it's just kind of like, oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, all I had to do, instead of the fucking months of adventures we have to go on with this man, all I had to do was open with him reading a pile of letters that he has let, fester in his, in his trunk, and the inciting incident. You know, we smash cut to this, right? The inciting incident that has made us smash cut to this is that, which we find out through this scene. This is all I have to do. Is that the people died from carbon monoxide poisoning.
Yeah.
And that traumatic transformation of his current escaping reality plan has forced him to go back to the reality that he's trying to escape by reading all of these letters that have piled up.
Right.
All you needed to do. All you needed to do. Whew, but that is not what happened.
No, there's going to be this whole thing about there's a secret German like geological station called Jotunheim. That only has like one guy in it.
Yeah, so used to have 3, but 2 of them killed each other.
Yeah, which, hey, I mean, I guess if you need like a microcosm of what the world ruled by Nazism would look like, I guess that's somewhat apropos.
Also, John, an interesting parallel to Distant Star, where the Nazis are attracted to the purity of the poles. Like one of the characters is really into the South Pole in Distant Star, and in this one, it's like, they're setting up their Antarctica base. So
it feels like a weird thing where, like we said, like there's no real purpose to this. It feels like this is like a thing, like Chabon clearly wanted this to be in the book. Yeah. It's like, I keep trying to think of like, what's he trying to do here? And is it like this, like truth is stranger than fiction thing where it's like, again, kind of by heightening things to this absurd degree, where like, this is not what most people's experience of World War II was like, but like Joseph Cavalier gets this very like weird picaresque thing. Yeah. And that's like, cause he's special, or is it this way where like he gets frustrated by not getting what he thinks he wants? it just,
There's
like
no
you said,
payoff.
there's no payoff. There's, except again, kind of this thing that he only half commits to, which is that he kills the German guy and then he feels bad about it.
Well, doesn't the guy die in an accident? Or I'm trying to remember the particulars.
Unclear. It is so unclear. He hears the C-sharp chime in his ear and then he shits himself and he's dead like a few minutes later.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
I think it's implied that Joe shot him in the scuffle.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because then he's like, "Oh, I'm gonna patch you up," and then he dies before he can help him. Yeah.
Yeah. But then I need listeners to understand that this man who got famous for drawing a comic book too good is now in this part of the book in the midst of a 2-leg plane ride to go kill a German person he's heard over the radio and has kept tabs on for 2 weeks now in a plane that is covered with seal skins and dog fur with a man who like shits beside his own bed at night. And like, I think that was what was implied there with the smell.
Yeah.
And then has a burst appendix in the middle of this trip. And then this guy who has once driven a car now has to fly a plane.
Yeah, and then after he kills the guy, he has to like drag himself to like another station to then like radio for help.
30-year-old cans of beans.
Yeah.
And like befriends a penguin.
Yeah, see, at the end of that, I just kind of sighed and was like, glad the scene is over. Like, it's just kind of like, I was like, how is he going to get out of this one? It's really just kind of the vibe you get the whole time. But,
yeah, and then we have a whole section about how German tourists go see this place, this plot of land for years until the ice shelf it's on breaks off and floats into the sea.
Yeah, see, like you were saying, John, truth is stranger than fiction. Like yeah, it just, I don't know. It's like he gets carried away with the invention here, like in terms of like what happens. So
I mean, like the best way I can like steel man it, or Man of Steel it, as it might be, is that he's trying to show like, oh, not even like heroism, like quote unquote heroism isn't fun. Like there's not like a way where you get to like escape from your problems and like go be Superman and punch Hitler and like not feel any particular way about it. Like real heroism is like messy and you probably are going to like do things you regret. Yeah. And there's probably like also going to be like a lot of indignity to it. Like the guy, like I did think that kind of like him discovering all of his comrades like dead of carbon monoxide poisoning, that was like a little bit like kind of affecting because it's oh, those guys weren't here to do that.
And the dogs too. Like there's more than one dog and all the dogs die as well. So
but it just doesn't work when I feel like the much more artful thing to do would be to basically he goes and we just never see anything that he does over there, and it's just he does, and when he gets back he doesn't want to talk about it, and maybe he mentions I killed one guy and I feel really bad about it. Right. And we don't learn any more about it because like my grandfather fought in World War II. He was in the Pacific Theater and he hated talking about what happened to him over there, even though he was theoretically like doing something good. You know, it's like being in war is traumatic, even if you're fighting in the one good one.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. I think too, when the construction of the plane is almost complete and there is one last Oyster the dog shaped hole in the hull, I was like, God damn it. You made me sit through all of this and now I have to watch you shoot and kill a dog.
Yeah, that's also when like his friend, like the other guy who's been antagonistic to him is actually nice to him. And he's like, yeah, we're going to treat the dog right. So then like Joseph like lies on his bed and cries while they like shoot the dog. Like, yeah, it's, yeah.
Son of a bitch, Michael.
Yeah, just really, really putting the screw in for how bad being a hero is in this, in this circumstance. So
it just doesn't work. Doesn't work.
Like I said at the beginning of this episode, it is relentlessly indulgent. And that takes so many forms in this book.
Like, honestly, I feel like there's almost a case to be made that this book would be stronger if it ends with the conversation between Sammy and Rosa.
About the abortion?
obviously you have to like set that up a little bit differently.
Yeah.
But I feel like there's kind of more weight there than in the actual ending.
Well, one thing John and I have also talked about is that Chabon has a problem with endings where like it seems like what the stories that he starts could feasibly go on, and so then he kind of has to like really bring the hammer down in a way that's like really apparent, or in this case takes too long to sort of wind everything back up after he gets back from Antarctica.
Well, I think it also comes down to, I feel like, Nat, I don't remember if we were recording when you mentioned this, but kind of the picture you'd been given of Chabon before you read any of his work, which was that he's a guy who basically is fundamentally like kind of writing. How did you put it?
He's a smart writer who picks smart topics and then transmutes them into dumb people bait.
Yes. So I feel like part of it is kind of the fact that Chabon is always like kind of keeping an eye on his audience, which is decidedly like middle-brow bourgeois. And so there always has to be kind of like a comforting ending. Yeah. And really like Mysteries of Pittsburgh thus far has been the only book that kind of has rejected that by just being kind of vague and weird and rushed.
Yeah.
But like,
and that was his first one, right?
Yes, that was his first one. Yeah,
he also got a huge advance for that. Like he got a ton of money. It's really absurd, but yeah.
Wow.
But then Wonder Boys like has that kind of like this one has this thing where it's like, well, maybe the real art is being a dad.
yeah.
The real escape trick is what was it? What is it called when you're doing like a replacement in Magic? Like.
Not a pass. No.
Oh man, I can't think of what it is.
Like a substitution. I think.
Yeah.
The real substitution trick is getting an 11-year-old to believe that this new guy is your dad.
Well, they even actually one of the last sentences in the book does that, because where it's like Joseph was trying to figure out the substitution that Sammy just pulled, where Sammy's sleeping on the couch and Joseph gets to sleep in the bed with Rosa.
And I'm yelling. He's like, he didn't pull a substitution. He left.
Yeah.
He left, and you knew he was going to do that. The only person fooled here is an incredibly wise 11-year-old boy, a world-weary tween.
Yeah, the bits where he's like, I love going to the city. I hate going to school. And I was like, yeah, this is very Royal Tenenbaums. Like that sequence where they fuck off and they're like riding on garbage trucks. Like it was like exactly that scene in Royal Tenenbaums.
Nobody's questioning this 11-year-old in an eye patch on the subway. Wednesday at 11 a.m.
Ophthalmologist.
Anyway,
he points to the eye patch and says ophthalmologist when the kid is trying to explain why he's not in school. So.
All right, we are getting ahead of ourselves. We're also not, because this is again this last section. So we come to the final section of the book.
Yeah, Joseph comes back from Antarctica.
Yes,
it's 11 years later.
The League of the Golden Key, because wouldn't you know it, the real super team is the nuclear family.
Thank God for happy endings, John.
But again, like this is the longest section of the book. I think it's like 150 some pages, and
I was so upset by this. I was yelling. I was screaming at it.
Almost nothing happens.
Yeah, this felt the most
even less happens than usual.
Yeah, this felt the most like, I don't know. It all like melded together where I was like, I feel like it should have been way shorter. And it feels like the book almost restarts where it's like they have to like the two of them start collaborating again. And you're like, oh, they're going to get back into the business. And then they like
back together.
Yeah, and then they don't. And then there's like a Jewish detective, which feels like Chabon figuring out like some of his books years in advance. Like the detective that's supposed to like figure out where Joseph is. They're like, oh, you're a Jewish detective. And he's like, yeah, I'm one of the new ones or something. Like they've never had this before. I'm like, wow, Chabon's writing the Yiddish Policemen's Union like years before it comes out. So like that happens. And then Tommy's being, raised by Rosa and Sammy. Rosa
we should mention
now,
that he's been named Tommy after the dead Tommy.
Oh yeah, I should have clarified. It's been named Tommy
It's very Faulknerian. Except that they're explicit about it.
Right, exactly. Like explicitly naming the kid. And so Rosa has become sort of like the breadwinner, and that she's doing like tons of her own assignments of her own stories. Sammy's still writing stuff. And then Joseph secretly, as you'd said, had been living in, I think, the Empire State Building for 9 years.
He's been living in an office. And but Rosa's not the only breadwinner, because Sammy like threatened to walk out on her at one point. He leaves the house, goes to Empire Comics, or goes to, was it Empire, or where was it, where he gets an editor
Comics
job? Yes. Yeah. And he gets the editor-in-chief job there and fires everybody.
Yeah.
Okay, so you became what you swore to destroy.
Like, no, you don't understand. It's different because then he does all the work personally.
Yeah, he does. So he just makes more money for his bosses. Like, instead of having to pay a stable of writers, they pay one incredibly beset upon unhappy gay man.
See, that also feels like the Escapist theme, where he's just putting more chains on him. Yeah. He's like, I'm gonna leave the chains I've set up, and then he just ties like 8 more to him. Like, and everyone's like, okay, fine. Like, yeah.
And so but eventually he becomes Rose's boss, because he hires her to start drawing romance comics.
Romance comics, yes.
Yes. And at this point she's not painting anymore, because the last painting ever was Joe in the nude right before Tommy died and he fucked off to Antarctica.
Yeah.
But so, and then Tommy is, as I've said over and over and over, a child wise beyond his years. It is one of my least favorite tropes in the whole world.
So wait, we got people talking about music, and then preternaturally wise 10-year-olds.
Yes. Like a 10-year-old who has the presence of mind to go to a store that has a display typewriter every week for however long and type up, please excuse Tommy, his ophthalmological problems are acting up again, or his problems of an ophthalmological nature are acting up again. And then he gets a novelty eye patch to just point to when the teachers ask him, embarrassing questions or problematic questions. And then what it turns out is that he saw his actual father, without realizing who it was, in the back room of a famous magic shop. And they make eye contact and they instantly basically know who each other is. Yeah. Right. And he seeks this man out, and this man seeks him out and starts basically apprenticing this kid in the ways of the world.
Yeah. Who is his son? Yeah.
And they set it up for the ending to be acceptable to us, the audience, by having this kid just know. He just knows that this guy's his dad. He just gets it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, again, like to I guess I'm not even being devil's advocate because I don't buy this, but like, I guess the implication is that like, because his parents are like such workaholics, like he's able to, like, no one asks questions of him.
Yeah.
Like no one calls the house and is like, hey, what do you mean ophthalmological problems? Because it's implied Sammy basically like comes home like 1 hour every 3 days.
Yeah.
Also, what did you guys think of the implication that Rosa is going to go cheat and then sees Tommy on the subway and then decides not to cheat because she sees Tommy who's going to see Joe?
Well, it's not cheating. They clearly have like
an arrangement, but like,
he
does say specifically, like, we don't have to tell Dad about this.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, that's true. But I mean, that might be more for Tommy's sake.
That's a good point. That is a good point, because
like that was an interesting bit of like, I feel like everything in the section was so, this is what it is, that suddenly having this scene where it's like there's something that's not being spelled out, I found kind of refreshing. I'm like,
well, you have to remember that Sammy's, I don't want to call them dalliances, his trysts, because they're, it's a marriage of convenience, but like his encounters of sexual natures are not something Rosa wants to be privy to. There's an unspoken nature to, I think, that aspect of their relationship. And I don't think she's hiding it from Sammy because she feels guilty. I think that there is like an equanimity and an equity to it, right? Where like, I don't need to know about Dad's stuff. Dad doesn't need to know about my stuff.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
But this gets into the stuff in this book that really kind of turned me off here at the end was a lot of the ways that sexuality is treated, frankly. We're basically like, there's kind of like, there seems like, again, Ben mentioned it, but the implication is kind of that we're going to kind of get the band back together. It's not found family because they're cousins.
Yeah.
But Cavalier and Clay is going to get back together. Like basically Joe has put aside so much money from what he was doing, nothing but working. That is
money
just,
he couldn't spend on Tommy because they didn't get the boat didn't arrive.
Yes.
But
it's all like in like the 12 years since then, like it's like the interest has just gone out of control. And so like he has tons of money. And so basically like Anipol and Ashkenazi are like looking to sell Empire Comics. And so, but they want $1 million for it. And it's like, oh, how convenient.
He's got $987,000.
Which I'll be fair. Chabon at least has the good graces to like make Sammy be conflicted about it. So it's not just a total like perfect like Deus Ex Machina.
I was like in the middle of it. I was like, are they really gonna do this? Is this really gonna be the ending of the book?
And we find out that Joe has been working on this Golem of Prague story, and they get together and they're like talking about it, and they figure like, oh, like so much has changed since the 1940s, like comics are in a different place. There's a reference to, I think, what's supposed to be Swamp Thing, where they're like, there's a character who's a big pile of dirt and plant matter, and kids love him.
But Swamp Thing didn't come out until like the 70s.
Okay, so maybe it was a real character that,
or it could have been Man Thing. I don't remember when Man Thing came out.
I think they called it the Mound, but I assumed it was supposed to be like a reference to that kind of a character.
That's what I thought too. But also you have to remember that I think time is a little funny in this.
Yeah, because Promethea comes out in the 40s in this universe.
Yeah, with Luna Moth basically.
Yeah. But so there's this implication that we're kind of there's gonna be like kind of a non-traditional family ending.
Yeah, and then the
Chabon
greatest trick ever pulled.
Yeah, Chabon is basically like, you know what? No, I can't have that happen. I'm going to exercise my gay self.
And send him to LA.
But you have to remember too, something else unfucking believable happens. The desiccated remains, the dust of the Golem of Prague ends up mailed from a mysterious source at their house.
Which, why? That's speaking of why, I got to that part and I'm like, no, thread left untied. But then I was just like, why did this need to happen? Like, I don't know. Like, come on.
Well, like there's and this is again, me, I really don't like this part where he's like, they're talking about like how the golem was super light when they pick it up in Prague at the beginning. And he says like, oh, the soul has left the golem. So it's much lighter now, and the box is much heavier than the golem originally was, even though it's just dirt now.
Okay.
And so like I feel like the implication is basically like, oh, Joseph has found his soul now that he has a traditional family structure again.
Yeah.
And all his comic books.
And all his comic books.
But I know you haven't read the two earlier novels, Nat, but Chabon definitely like kind of has this, like he's I don't know if he's out as bisexual, but he's admitted to like basically I was bi in the past.
Interesting.
And Mysteries of Pittsburgh
get better.
Well, but it's like so Mysteries of Pittsburgh, the main character is bi, and he has like a relationship with a guy and a woman simultaneously, and it's very messy in like early 20s.
Like that's the core conflict of the Mysteries of Pittsburgh is basically him like trying to figure out like, can I be bisexual? Will my girlfriend and my boyfriend let us be in like a throuple situation?
And they don't. But Chabon gets put on a list of like up and coming gay authors.
I saw that. I heard about that.
Yeah, and he's just kind of like, I mean, not really, but I'm not going to go out of my way and say no. And then at some point, he's just kind of like, I don't feel like I can speak to the gay experience, but then in like the next book, there's a very prominent gay character who is like the straight guy's best friend. And there's this, John and I talked about like the gay character can have dalliances and like, live sort of recklessly.
Unattached and free.
Yeah, unattached and free, whereas the straight guy has to eventually get a family. And so then in this one, it's like, it's like we're doing that again, kind of like, and I also feel like you can see Chabon working stuff in stages of his life. Whereas in the second book, like there's a really developed relationship with a woman. And then in this one, there's a kid, even if the kid is like a genius. So I think he's kind of like incorporating things into the fiction based on his own life. But yeah, there's this sort of like ongoing engagement with like, just what it means to be gay and or straight in comparison. So
I was going to say, like, it feels like it feels like I can almost kind of get from the standpoint, like I get being like, well, I'm maybe I'm bi, maybe I've had a bisexual experiences, but I'm in like a heterosexual monogamous relationship now. I'm not going to necessarily like label myself that, but this feels like he's trying to do it in like this way that seems like progressive, basically, where he's like, oh, well, I'm going to let Sammy go and he's going to go to LA and that's like where he belongs.
Yeah.
Because crucially, like Sammy was going to go to LA with Tracy Bacon before they got busted. And so it has been this thing where it's like a path not taken.
Yeah.
But honestly, the thing that really bothered me with this ending is not even so much that, which I obviously did not like, but it's how Rose is treated in this.
Yeah.
Where so the final image the book ends on is so they've like moved into like a suburban like Levittown community in Long Island. Like that's where their house is. And Sammy, like when he bought the house, he got like a card that said the Clays and then their address. And before he leaves, he takes out that card, which he's like carried in his wallet for some reason for years. Another like, again, thing that's there just to be like a flourish, but doesn't make any actual sense.
Yeah, it's the title card drop at the end of the movie. Yeah.
Theme. And he crosses out the Clays on it and he writes Cavalier and Clay, which, was they're
implying that they're going to be in business together.
Yeah.
No, that's not what's implying. What it's implying is that now the house is the house of Cavalier and Clay.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Because
I
Rosa
too,
is now
right.
Rosa Clay.
Yeah.
So I really hate that. I hate that there's this thing where it's like they're in a sham marriage and Rosa just like has to give up her identity even when she gets back together with Joseph.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It
should say like Cavalier and Clay and Sachs or whatever. Yeah.
I think,
and like, I get it's the 50s. Like I get that there's stuff there, but it feels like kind of this moment where the desire for like, the big image ends up having like all these kind of like nasty, like undertones.
We have to get, I think we need for the audience to explain exactly what the motivating events were for Sammy's leaving and why we're talking about all this bisexual or all this the sexuality stuff. The fact is that what happens was the cover gets blown on this secret apprenticeship between Tommy and his father, Joe. And it gets blown wide open because Tommy writes a letter to the New York Herald Tribune saying that the escapist is going to jump from the Empire State Building.
Right.
And Joe, I forget why he did that. But Joe actually sets this in motion, even though Tommy didn't mean for it to.
Yes. Joe's like, well, we're going to go through with it. Yeah.
Yeah. He dresses up as the escapist. That's when we get the Jewish detective who's like on the scene. He's a hostage negotiator having to do this or whatever, instead.
Also, side note, it's funny that the Jewish detective can see through an 11-year-old boy's cover, whereas the adults cannot.
The man's ostensible father cannot.
Yeah. But anyway, yeah. So they're on the scene. They're there. Yeah.
Yeah. So Joe ends up 35-year-old man dressed in a costume for a 20-year-old on top of the Empire State Building, surrounded by orphans.
Right.
who have made a field trip into the city
just to see him. Yeah.
Just to see. Yeah.
The escapist. Yeah.
Yeah. And he bungee jumps, not realizing that the bungee cord that he used is very old and brittle, and it breaks, and he just falls onto the roof, the outcropping of the floor below him, and he gets sent
just
to the hospital.
Straight down.
Yeah. Gets sent to the hospital and then eventually to jail. And in jail, he gets bailed from jail by Sammy, who was brought downtown by Tommy to see all of this stuff going on.
Right.
Sammy calls Rosa to tell her that the love of her life, whom she thought she would never see again, is back.
Yes.
It's been 9 years since they'd heard anything about Joe, because Joe jumped ship at Guantanamo when they were trying to bring him home on medical leave from his stint in the Arctic, and then just disappeared.
Yeah. And he didn't reply to any of the letters.
It didn't reply to any of the letters. And then we get exactly 251 pages of Rosa reacting to this by flashing back to her now working under Sammy at the comic books at the comic production house. And that was especially when I was yelling, I don't care, I don't care, I don't care. What does she say on the phone? I don't care about all of this. And then after Joe, the tumult of Joe coming back, Sammy gets a subpoena to appear in front of the Senate subcommittee on whether comic books turn your kids gay.
Right. And then the expert
which was
says,
a real thing.
Yeah,
yes.
Right. Yeah. And then the expert says or implies that his predilection for putting sidekicks into characters means that he's gay.
Yeah.
Or they just ask that question to him directly, and then he doesn't really answer it because he's
and then
shocked.
he has horrible staircase wit at the bar later that day, where he's like, I should have told him that it would increase his profit.
Yeah. He's
right?
flashbacking and yeah.
And then the king of kings, George Deasy, shows up at the bar and was like, you should go to LA. By the way, I work for the CIA now.
I forgot that Deasy is there. Another one of those threads coming back. It's like, we're bringing Deasy back. He works for the CIA now.
And what he does, he comes up and he says to the bartender who's been making fun of Sammy sidelong for being gay and appearing on television, right? And he throws some dismissive money on the bar and he says, you know why Batman and Robin fuck each other? And the bartender's like, what? And he says, because they can't go fuck themselves like you can.
Yeah, give me a drink or something. Yeah, I like that Deasy has all of the cutting wit lines as well. He just swoops in to save Sammy basically.
He has a great bit there where he's like, Sammy's like, yeah, I thought I could be happy in LA, and Deasy's like, you still could be. And he's like, well, what about you? And he's like, I'm too old to be happy.
Yeah. And he says, I don't find your particular persuasion disgusting unless I'm thinking about you personally engaging in it.
Yeah, Deasy does come out on top in terms of being the coolest character in this book.
I'm on Team Deasy.
Yeah.
except for joining the CIA.
Yeah, I was about to say.
Yeah, that's not good. Well, so then Sammy's like, I can't stay in this relationship now that I've been on TV, which is one of the impetuses for moving, as well as Deasy suggesting he moves to LA.
Yeah, which he does, and they trick this world-weary 11-year-old into having a new dad. The end.
And
he's already
also
kind of been his dad for months at this point.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and he did. They were careful to shoehorn in that he overheard his parents saying that he was adopted.
Yes,
he already knows that Sammy isn't his dad.
He feels a biological imperative to glom onto his real dad and learn magic.
He's like, these people are in love with each other. Yeah, there's a scene from his perspective.
Oh my god! Yeah, he sees a photograph in the just thumbs down. He sees a photograph in the garage of 20 and 21-year-old Rosa and Joe, and he's like, oh, this is my dad.
Yeah.
People don't look at each other like this unless they have me as a kid.
Well, so also one last thread, they talk about maybe working together even if he's in LA, Do you think they do that? Because, like, I gotta say, I like the best part about this section is the description of the golem, which is obviously just like a graphic novel, like, I guess years ahead of time. But, like, I really like the way the golem is described. And to me, that was my favorite part of this somewhat interminable section. It was just like, it's like really cool that this thing, like, that Joseph made that they might publish. And then, you know, that kind of gets lost in the shuffle of plot stuff. But
yeah, I don't know if they ever, I think it's implied by the fact that and again, I didn't read the end notes like you did.
They don't talk about publishing stuff. It's just like, where did they end up is what it says. Yeah.
Okay. Like the fact that he's at WonderCon in the 90s and he's talking about superheroes only.
Yeah.
Kind of makes me think that they didn't publish the Golem.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like, again, my qualms about it aside, I feel like the idea here is that Joe escaped to go be in World War II.
Yeah.
Whereas Sammy weighs himself down and is afraid to be his real self.
Joe's burden on top of his
Joe's
own.
burdens, exactly. Yeah. And so Joe comes back and Sammy can now free himself.
Okay. Yeah.
And it would actually be unfair to Sammy to continue to take part in their relationship, given the fact that he has basically been Joe's, like, this. The idea, I think, is that this is Sammy getting to be the hero of his story instead of being Joe's sidekick.
The hero, which is an escapist.
Which is escaping from the stultifying, heteronormative world of 1950s Long Island to go to the queer paradise of 1950s Los Angeles.
Yeah. And everybody knows that nobody in Los Angeles in the 50s ever appeared before a court hearing.
That's actually a really funny sequel, is that, Sammy leaves New York and like two months later is like called up in front of HUAC.
Yeah, let's say he gets McCarthyized.
Well, so like
maybe he meets Adorno and they get to chat. I don't know.
Honestly, that would be great. That's my headcanon sequel, is that he links up with Adorno and Horkheimer and all of the German intellectual expats in LA.
Well, he's already worked with one CIA adjacent writer.
Yeah. But then just like Adorno's like immediately dismissive of comics, and then he's like, maybe, like, or something. Like,
He's like, I don't know. I don't see a revolution in these pages.
Yeah.
No. See, comics are much smarter in this world because they invented making them smart in 1943 instead of.
They invented using Watchmen the page instead of the panel in 1943.
Yeah, there's sufficiently like Beckett, because Adorno loves Beckett. There's like, oh yes, yeah, I love comics. Yeah,
Crap's last issue.
Yeah, yeah, that's in my headcanon for that, definitely. So
that's so good. So that goes along with John Lennon still being alive.
Yes. No, it's the space age. It's like the world if meme. And it's like, this is the world if they invented using the page instead of the panel in 1943.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So that's Cavalier and Clay. What an amazing adventure.
I mean, I'm not going to defend the book necessarily. I'm going to say that, again, I think that it is, for all its many, many faults, it's an interesting text.
Yeah. I didn't not enjoy it. I just wish there had been less of it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And even the superfluous stuff, like, one thing I do find with Chabon, his books, the maybe just because of his like way with words, they do move fairly quickly. Yeah. Like I find myself like going at like 2 pages a minute, which is pretty fast.
There was one sentence in it that I just had to keep revisiting because it was so flowery and so like the action in it was so buried, and it was right after they had accepted the extra paycheck or extra money for not including Nazis in the story, and how that led to their artistic burgeoning, right? Now that they were like the creativity under the fetters. Right?
Was that the Citizen Kane stuff, like post Citizen Kane?
It was just in that section, right? That one sentence where where he literally says that issues 13 through 19 or something like that are now legendary because of the the constraints that they put upon it. I had to revisit that sentence like 6 times to understand what the fuck he was saying.
See, what he's saying, Nat, is again that the burdens of bourgeois family life are the things that really make you work as an artist. All this stuff where you're bohemian and gay, that's actually not good for your art. What's really good for your art is having a big house in the suburbs,
picking one of 8 models of house.
Yeah, the 50s conformity. I had one final thought. I flagged this because I wanted to ask your guys' opinion on it. I guess if we're pretty much at the back end, and I'm going to read the quote, but my opening statement is, do you think Chabon is explaining like entertainment well when he does this? Because I have a couple thoughts about it, and here's the quote. I'm not going to read all of it. So this is where he's basically drawing a comparison between comic books, golems, and escapism. The shaping of a golem to him, this is Joe, was a gesture of hope offered against hope in a time of desperation. It was the expression of a yearning that a few magic words in an artful hand might produce something, one poor, dumb, powerful thing, exempt from the crushing strictures, from the ills, cruelties, and inevitable failures of the greater creation. It was the voicing of a vain wish, when you got down to it, to escape. And as he says, if for one instant, I'm skipping ahead, to poke his head through the borders of this world with its harsh physics into the mysterious spirit that lay beyond. The newspaper articles that Joe had read about the upcoming Senate investigation into comic books always cited escapism among the litany of injurious consequences of their reading, and dwelled on their pernicious effect on young minds of satisfying the desire to escape, as if there could be any more noble or necessary service in life. Do you think that's a good defense of what we might say is like pulp? If we want to keep it in terms of like comic books, tricks, and like pulp writing, and maybe throw in literature too. But like, if that's the thing that's going to like put them all together, does that scan?
Nat, do you mind if I take the lead here?
Go for it, please.
I'm going to answer your question, Ben, with one of my favorite little bon mots offered by Michael Moorcock. So there's a quote, which is, I'm going to quote him, but also quote the thing he's referencing in the quote, which is J.R.R. Tolkien wrote basically, like somebody asked him about like the utility of like escapist fiction. And he said, well, there's nothing that jailers hate more than escapism. And Michael Moorcock responded to that by saying, you know what? Jailers love escapism, because that just means that you're imagining escaping. What jailers really hate is jailbreaks.
Yeah, they hate escapes.
Which I think, given Tolkien being, kind of a classic, like, hoary weirdo, and Moorcock being, if nothing else, a committed anarchist, our qualms with anarchism as a philosophy aside, maybe it's an ethos at the very least.
Say what you will. Yeah.
I think that is where what I found myself thinking of with kind of that sort of escapism that he's pointing to. I think that it's something that so my thing with escapism, I think that it's actually in kind of a Freudian sense. I think it's just part of our psyches. Like we imagine other worlds and like kind of try to wish ourselves into them. And art is one of the many ways we do that. I think that escapism can be pernicious when it does not have like a greater purpose. And I feel like this book kind of actually gets to that, maybe on accident, with kind of the ways where the problem in this book is Nazism. Yeah. And working in the comic books is like a way to avoid fighting Nazis in like a certain way, or like it's a way of like killing time until FDR will let you go fight the Nazis.
Yeah.
And I feel like for there to be like a utility to escapist art outside of just kind of psychological soothing, it needs to be like wedded to like a greater purpose. And I feel like that is kind of where Chabon like fails in this book, because I feel like the conclusions he comes to are very safe. Yeah. Where again, I don't know if there's like a communist or like revolutionary version of this book you could write, because it's not really about that. But I think that kind of even on like the like smaller revolutionary potential of like, what if like a gay guy and his straight cousin and their what if they could both be dads to the same son?
Yeah.
The fact that he kind of pulls back from even that to sort of this much airier thing where it's like, oh, Sammy gets to go away and go to the gay paradise of LA.
Yeah, almost literally rides into the sunset.
Yeah. It feels like kind of this thing where we're still just escaping at the end. Like, there's no attempt to actually grapple with reality or to deal with life as it is. It's just kind of this thing where we can always just keep projecting ourselves into a fantasy world.
Yeah.
And I think that that's something people are going to keep doing forever, regardless. Like, no matter what like mode of production we're living under, like people are always going to write fantasy. But like, what is the utility of that? And especially like living in America, which is a country that's like built on just cumulative layers of like fantasy and delusion.
Right.
That this book kind of is very happy to embrace in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
I do think there's something, I don't know if I want to say sinister in it, but there's definitely something that feels a little bit pointless.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I guess if I were to tackle this about Chabon in particular, there's a tweet that went around for a while. A lot of people sent it to me, and I think I pretty vehemently disagree with it, although it's sort of up to interpretation. And it was somebody tweeted, it went very viral. They said, Superman isn't a power fantasy about what you would do with power. It's a power fantasy about what somebody else would do with power. Somebody good with power would do. And I don't think that's true. I mean, in certain instances, I mean, Superman there's tons of different ways to write Superman. He's been written tons of different ways. Who cares? Initially, he was written by a short, chubby, pimply, lonely Jewish kid who just lost his dad to a heart attack in a robbery. Right? It was literally, he was like, I didn't get the girls. I wanted to draw myself getting the girls, or like write myself like I wanted to have power. That's what he was initially for, but it was written by somebody who had the good sense to use that power for good, right? And when people read Superman comics like that, they didn't just see somebody else doing something good. They saw somebody tackling the problems they have. They saw themselves tackling problems that they had in the pages of Superman, right? We've got a book full of self-insert characters that I found it very difficult to see myself in, right? I saw Michael Chabon in those characters, right? I saw the escapist as a different person putting himself into that character, but not necessarily in a way that other people would see themselves in. I mean, a lot of people wanted to see the Nazis, and I think it was pretty explicit about that, but it was a one-trick pony, right? What Chabon is saying with that, impossible to tell. Impossible to say. I don't think it betrays a misunderstanding of superheroes. I really don't. I think he loves them. I think he gets them. I think he just wanted to tell this particular story and ignored the fact that originally people saw themselves doing these acts of great alacrity and justifiable violence. So as far as whether or not he gets entertainment as escapism, it's really up in the air.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with both of what your guys are saying, and I almost feel like in trying to tie them all together, he kind of like flattens all of these interesting distinctions that we could have between them, and it almost feels like a little too neat, just because like John was saying, I think like escapism, like you have to kind of return, like it's like you read a book and then you escape, but then you have to like go back to your life, and I feel like a lot of this stuff kind of like that kind of, there's less emphasis on that. It's more like the act of escaping and like the idea of there being limitless possibility. where I find like in escapist literature, I think coming back to life afterwards is like the important part. That's where the action happens. That's where maybe you're changed. And I think there's less of an emphasis kind of on that. Or it's either that, or I think he's like flattening these interesting distinctions he's brought up and trying to like tie them all together. But yeah, there isn't really like people, we don't see a lot of fans besides Carl Ebling, and I think maybe if there were more like more other people reading it, I mean the book would be bigger, but I think we'd get more of what you were saying.
No.
yeah I think we'd get what you were saying now, where like we'd be able to see other people as opposed to just kind of like our major Forrest Gumpian players, you know, such as they are.
Well, I think that you're getting to a key point, Ben, is that for as much page count as this book has, the cast is actually very small.
Yeah.
Especially once you get past that first section where they've kind of like, after that first bit where they get their group together and they basically make like the first comic book that they do, all the other people in that like creative set basically totally fall out of the story. Mm-hmm. And it's just like Sammy and Joe, and then kind of these other couple names we've mentioned here and there, but it's not a big cast to be carrying a book this size.
Yeah.
And I do feel like that is maybe actually a bit of a weakness where I think part of it is these characters get kind of exhausting because you spend so much time with them, and they're
mostly Joe. Mostly Joe. The Joe to Sammy ratio is totally skewed.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Because I think that's where Chabon is like trying to get to, is like I think we know where his sympathies actually lie at a certain point.
Right.
Yeah.
Or at least what he's trying to convince himself.
Yeah, because he's not gay. He's not gay.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's an interesting text. I appreciate it a lot more having read his other books so far. You know, I think reading an author like chronologically is always going to be kind of a rich way to approach their work.
Yeah.
Especially, I don't know, I guess a guy like Chabon who's very consciously like Freudian, maybe a little more so. But yeah, it's a hard book to like just recommend out of hand.
Yeah.
Which is by way of saying, Nat, thank you so much for reading this book.
Yeah, Nat, you're an ideal third mic on this because I feel like you've got the background to kind of be like, this is good or like this is too much in terms of like what's going on. So yeah, thanks again for coming on. I don't know if John had mentioned it, but yeah, like I forgot that it was this big. So even when I was reading it, I was like, well, there's like a lot of text here.
Well,
so
I think because because life got in the way and stuff like that, I had to put off. This is a little pulling the curtain back for some people. I had to put this off for a little while. But I do remember at one point you guys came to me and said, well, if you want to do something else, that'd be fine. It's like, no. I've committed. We're doing this.
I'm all in.
Sunk cost.
Yeah, I was like very cagey to like ask because I was like, I've never asked someone to read like a 600 page book for the show before, especially like a complete stranger at this point.
Yeah.
Like you followed us on Twitter, but that was about the extent of our interactions. Yeah. And I was like, I'm about to ask someone I don't know to read a 600 page book that I'm not sure if it's good or not.
And then tell me about it.
Yeah. So, yeah.
This is blast. I had a great time.
No. Thanks for I mean, this is our first recording that's gone 3 hours.
3 hours.
Yes.
Holy shit.
We might have to look into we might want to like split this into two parts or
something. We might do that because the other time was in a similar situation to that. I basically asked John if he would read Middlemarch with me, and we also went almost 3 hours, and it was basically just like read Middlemarch with me, like so. But
it was a wonderful time though. We had a great I loved time. Reading Middlemarch. But
well, Nat, do you have any plugs that we want to get on the recording? Anything you want to get the word out?
Well, I've just started my third season of Collective Action Comics. The first two seasons dealt with respectively the rise of Reagan and neoliberalism as told through a really shitty Justice League comic made by two ostensibly good liberals. The second season is that very brief, unbelievable furor, not furor, of a time when just after 9/11, before we'd invaded Iraq, The Ultimates, the gritty reboot of the Avengers, was coming out by Mark Miller, a man who believes that reptiles control the government. And so I chronicle Bush era imperialism with that book. And then currently I'm releasing season 3, which is on the death and return of Superman. And because it's a 1992 to 1993 event, I'm using it as actually more of something that looks forward to a future that will never happen, because these people have such high expectations of what the Clinton administration will bring. And, you know, will essentially, I don't think they realize it, but so many liberals would not have their wildest dreams come true with the Clinton administration and subsequent Democrat administrations. So it chronicles the 30-year rightward shift of the Democratic Party, starting with then.
Nice.
If people want to find that on anything, you know, I'm on all major platforms. I do all of the writing, the research, the editing, the production, the music, the sound effects, and all of that myself. So if you are enthused by it, I'd love it if people threw a few bucks my way via Patreon, stuff like that. You know, the regular plugs.
Yeah, just to put my cards on the table. Obviously, I do to invite you, so I've listened. But particularly this new season you're doing, though, I think just the first episode is out at the moment, correct?
Exactly.
But that first episode, man, it was really like you really kicked it up a notch. I feel like I've really liked the 2 previous seasons, but it really feels like you are cooking with gas in this new one. That first episode was just really awesome. So,
yeah, I particularly appreciated the saxophone sample for when you were talking about Clinton.
And that's gonna keep going through.
And like you didn't really
season.
spell it out, which is also great. Like you just hear the saxophone, and you're like, oh, okay, like yeah. So yeah.
I was like, I randomly clicked on a part of his YouTube video, or the YouTube video where he is appearing on Arsenio Hall's show, like right at that beat where he hits the header for Heartbreak Hotel, and I'm like, that's it.
Yeah, that's it right
that's
there. Yeah. It was very, very, very genius. So yeah.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. I've been a fan of you guys' show for a while now. Again, I think I mentioned before we were recording, the bit that got me was when you're talking about Bellflower and somebody 9/11's a house with flying a plane into it. And I terrified an old man while I was out on my walk that day listening to it because I laughed so hard. Really big fan.
Yeah.
Well, good to hear. We're super happy to hear it. We would love to have you on again. This has been
yeah,
but
not a 600-page book.
No. Maybe next time we'll give you the nice easy experience we gave Walt, and we'll read a comic book.
Yeah, that sounds great. That sounds really good. Or how about the Wikipedia description of a comic book?
Yeah, we can compare Wikipedia. Yeah.
All right. Well, listeners, you know where to find us as always, except we're not really on Twitter that much anymore. So we are on the new site, Blue Sky, if you want to follow us there. But other than that, we'll see you here in 2 weeks.
Separate books.
Thank you for listening to The Infinite Library. If you liked our show, we hope you'll subscribe and leave us a review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or the podcast app of your choice. It helps us a lot. If you want to follow us on social media, we can be found on Twitter, Instagram, and Blue Sky at Infinite Library Pod. If you'd like to contact our team directly with episode ideas or feedback, you can email us at infinitelibrarypod@gmail.com. Our intro music is by Amos Legend in the Forest of Mayhem. Our outro music is by DJ Daggy Diggs, and our logo was created by Lars Noir. You can support our show by supporting them. We hope you'll join us back in the stacks for the next episode soon. Semper Books, bookheads.